before you ever step into a confrontation. Remember this, the strongest victories happen long before the battle begins. Power isn't about aggression, it's about control. Control of your mind, your emotions, and the space you allow others to occupy in your life. Today, I'm going to show you 10 ways to defeat your enemy without ever throwing a punch. You don't need force, you don't need noise. What you need is strategy, awareness, and the ability to influence the battlefield without stepping onto it. Because real strength, it's quiet, it's intentional, and it's always 2 steps ahead. Controlling the space before anyone enters, it begins with understanding that every environment carries energy, influence, and unspoken rules long before you open your mouth. The person who shapes the tone first often becomes the one who leads, directs, and dominates the dynamic. This isn't about intimidation or force. It's about establishing a psychological perimeter that lets others know you are grounded, aware, and in command of yourself and your surroundings. When you walk into a room, people don't react to what you say. They react to what you broadcast through your presence, posture, and preparedness. To control the space, you must own your internal state before you ever step outward. Your breathing, mental clarity, and emotional neutrality all communicate something powerful, that you're not seeking approval, reacting impulsively, or chasing validation. People instinctively sense when someone is centered, and they adjust their behavior around that stability. Controlling the space means you're not entering with fear, insecurity, or hyperarousal. Instead, you enter with a slow, deliberate calm that signals you're not easily moved. You create an atmosphere where people think twice before they test boundaries or push your limits. Preparation is a major part of controlling the space. Knowing what you're walking into gives you leverage. You understand the personalities, the layout, the dynamics, and the possible outcomes. This allows you to adapt your stance, your tone, and your level of engagement before situations escalate. It's the difference between reacting blindly and navigating with precision. When you anticipate tension or manipulation, you eliminate surprise attacks and stay mentally ahead. People who control the space assume nothing yet observe everything. They are never caught unprepared because they treat every environment as a system they can influence through awareness. Your body language plays an enormous role in this. You don't rush, you don't fidget, you don't perform. You hold your ground with stillness because stillness is strength. Fast, jittery movements reveal anxiety, but deliberate, intentional movement conveys someone who is evaluating, thinking, and unconcerned with external pressure. Eye contact is steady but not aggressive. Your voice is measured, firm, and low enough to force people to lean into your words, not recoil from them. You use pauses, silence, and pacing to set your rhythm, not follow someone else's. The more you manage these nonverbal cues, the more you command the emotional temperature of the space. Another part of controlling the space is controlling how much information you give away. You don't overshare, over-explain, or rush to fill silence. People who reveal too much too quickly lose control because they hand others the tools to manipulate them. When you are concise, intentional, and selective with your words, you create an aura of unpredictability that makes people more cautious around you. They sense they can't easily read you, and that uncertainty shifts the power dynamic in your favor. The less predictable you are, the harder it is for someone to strategize against you. Controlling the space also means not allowing anyone else's energy to override yours. If someone is loud, chaotic, or aggressive, you don't mirror them. Mirroring gives them control. Instead, you anchor yourself deeper into calm. Calm becomes your shield and your message. It tells others that their attempts to provoke or dominate are ineffective. When someone realizes they can't move you emotionally, they lose momentum. You become the steady point in the room, the reference point others adjust around. It's not about being dominant, it's about being immovable. When you practice this consistently, people begin to respect your presence before you even speak. They sense that your energy sets the tone, and they instinctively follow your lead. Mastering your emotional state is the foundation of real power because the moment someone can sway your emotions, they can control your decisions, reactions, and even your identity. People often assume strength comes from physical dominance or verbal aggression, but true strength lies in your ability to stay composed when others try to pull you into chaos. When you master your emotional state, you become unpredictable, unshakable, and far more strategic than anyone who is driven by anger, fear, or insecurity. You stop being a participant in other people's emotional games and start becoming the one who sets the emotional standard for every interaction around you. Most people go through life reacting instead of choosing. They get triggered by tone, posture, criticism, or disrespect. They take the bait every time someone tries to get a rise out of them, but when you learn how to regulate your internal temperature, you no longer dance to anyone else's rhythm. You respond with intention, not impulse. That presence is what gives you psychological advantage. When you're calm, you can see things others miss: people's motives, their tells, their weaknesses, their stress points. You become a collector of information instead of a prisoner of emotion. In conflict, that gives you silent leverage. To master your emotional state, you first have to understand what triggers you. Everyone has pressure point, ego, insecurity, impatience, the need to be right. The problem isn't the trigger itself. It's not knowing you're being triggered. Awareness is the first step. You have to catch the emotional shift before it grabs control. That means noticing your breathing, your tone, your posture, your heartbeat. When you feel yourself tightening or wanting to lash out, that's your signal to pause. Emotional mastery is never about suppressing your feelings. It's about not allowing those feelings to dictate your behavior. You remain in the driver's seat even when emotions are loud. Another layer of mastery is learning to detach from the opinions and emotional states of others. When someone insults you, challenges you, or tries to provoke you, they're testing for entry points. They want to see what you react to so they can use it later. If you react strongly, you reveal your vulnerabilities. If you stay composed, you give them nothing. Your neutrality becomes a mirror that reflects their own emotional instability. This not only throws them off but also forces them to adjust to your pace. Most confrontations escalate because both people start operating from emotion rather than strategy, but if one person stays grounded, the entire dynamic shifts. Your emotional state is also tied to your self-belief. Confident people regulate their emotions because they don't feel threatened by other people's behavior. Insecure people react quickly because everything feels like a personal attack. Mastering your emotional state means knowing your value without needing external validation. You don't need to prove yourself, defend yourself, or win every argument. You already know who you are, so others' attempts to define you fall flat. That inner certainty creates a powerful calm that people can sense immediately. Breathing, posture, and tone also play a huge part in maintaining emotional control. When your breathing is steady, your mind stays clear. When your posture is open and grounded, your body signals safety instead of panic. When your tone remains measured, you communicate authority without aggression. The key is consistency. The more you practice regulating these physical cues, the more automatic your emotional stability becomes. It stops being an effort and becomes a part of who you are. Emotional mastery changes every interaction because it disarms hostility, neutralizes manipulation, and elevates your presence. People feel the difference. They sense you're not someone who can be knocked off balance. They sense that your emotions aren't available for them to play with. And when that happens, you begin to influence the room without raising your voice or explaining your power. Using silence as a strategic weapon is one of the most underestimated forms of power because silence forces people to reveal themselves while you reveal nothing. When most individuals feel uncomfortable with quiet, they rush to fill the space with explanations, excuses, or information they never intended to share. But when you use silence intentionally, it becomes a psychological tool that shifts control in your favor. The person who is comfortable with silence gains the upper hand because they dictate the pace of the interaction without ever raising their voice or pushing their agenda. Silence allows you to read the environment, gather data, and observe what's really happening beneath the surface. People assume that speaking more makes them look confident, but in reality, over-talking often exposes insecurity or a need for validation. Silence conveys certainty. It tells others you don't need to impress, convince, or win approval. You're grounded enough to let the other person show their motives first. When someone challenges you or tries to provoke you, silence becomes a barrier they cannot penetrate. Instead of reacting emotionally or defensively, you pause, hold your ground, and let the moment breathe. That pause unsettles people because it disrupts their expectations. They expect a reaction, silence denies it. They expect a counterattack, silence delays it. And in that delay, they begin to wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, or what you've already understood. It creates a mental pressure that works in your favor. Silence is also a way of listening at a deeper level. When you stop talking, you start hearing what people really mean, not just what they say. Their tone, their hesitations, their contradictions, their nervousness, all of it becomes easier to detect. You notice what they avoid, what they emphasize, where their voice tightens or softens. You see their body language shift. You watch how they respond when they don't get immediate feedback. People reveal more through silence than they ever do through words, and the person who knows how to listen becomes the one who understands the entire situation long before anyone else. Another powerful aspect of silence is how it influences negotiation and confrontation. When someone throws out an offer, a threat, or a manipulative comment, silence forces them to reconsider. They begin filling the quiet with additional explanations, sweeteners, or changes to their story. They start backtracking or justifying themselves. They begin revealing their real intentions, including what they fear or what they need. Silence exposes desperation in others, especially those who rely on pressure tactics. The more silent you remain, the more they scramble to regain control of the dynamic, and in that scramble they lose clarity and credibility. Silence also protects your emotional state. When you choose not to react immediately, you create a boundary between stimulus and response. That boundary gives you time to assess the situation, evaluate your options, and choose the most effective action rather than the most impulsive one. You stay grounded instead of being swept into someone else's emotional storm. This level of restraint communicates strength, especially in high-pressure situations. The quieter you become, the more others realize they cannot manipulate you with urgency, fear, or aggression. Using silence strategically means you speak only when your words serve a purpose. Every sentence becomes deliberate. Every pause becomes meaningful. People start leaning in, not because you're loud, but because you're selective. They sense that when you do speak, it matters. Silence amplifies your words by giving them weight. Silence builds anticipation, heightens focus, and eliminates noise. It allows you to operate with clarity while others become tangled in their own reactions. When you control silence, you control the flow of the interaction, the rhythm of the conversation, and the psychological space between you and everyone else in the room. Observing everything and reacting to nothing is the kind of power that separates people who move with intention from those who move through life controlled by impulse. When you adopt this approach, you begin to see the world in a way most people never will, because observation gives you access to information that others overlook. People reveal their patterns, motives, insecurities, and agendas through their behavior long before they put anything into words. When you watch without rushing to respond, you catch the details, the micro expressions, the tone shifts, the pauses, the contradictions that expose exactly who they are and what they want. You stop relying on assumptions and start working with evidence. Most people react instantly to whatever energy is thrown at them. They hear something they don't like and immediately defend themselves. They see someone act disrespectfully and immediately push back. But reacting quickly gives away your emotional predictability. It tells people exactly how to pull you off center, how to provoke you, how to manipulate you. The one who reacts becomes the one who can be controlled. Observation reverses that dynamic. When you hold your reaction, you withhold access to your inner world. No one knows what you're thinking, how you're processing, or whether you're affected at all. That uncertainty becomes a silent shield. Observation requires patience, and patience is a form of discipline that many people never develop. When you observe, you create space between someone's behavior and your response. In that space, you gain perspective. You notice whether the other person is acting from emotion, insecurity, or strategy. You see whether their aggression is real or performative, whether their confidence is stable or fragile. You catch the moments when their story doesn't align with their body language. You pay attention to who interrupts, who avoids eye contact, who overexplains, who rushes, who hesitates. These small cues reveal far more truth than their words ever will. Observing also helps you understand power dynamics. Every interaction has a hierarchy, spoken or unspoken. Some people are trying to impress you, others are trying to test you, and some are trying to dominate the space. If you react too quickly, you fall into the position they're trying to assign you. But if you stay still and watch, you decide your place in the dynamic. You see where the leverage is, who holds influence, who is insecure, who is performing for attention. You begin to understand the psychology of the room rather than just the noise of the moment. Reacting to nothing doesn't mean you suppress your feelings or become passive. It means you choose your responses intentionally, based on understanding rather than instinct. You don't let someone else dictate the tempo of the conversation. You don't let their tone change yours. You don't let their emotion override your judgment. The less you react, the more control you maintain, and the more control you maintain, the more you can influence outcomes quietly and effectively. This level of observation turns you into someone others can't easily read or manipulate. People become cautious around you because you're not offering them the usual cues. No rapid, fire responses, no emotional spikes, no predictable reactions. You become the person who can't be rattled, the one who stays centered even when tension rises. This psychological neutrality makes you a force in any environment. You are gathering information while everyone else is busy expressing, proving, and defending themselves. You are choosing your moment while they are losing theirs. The more you practice observing everything and reacting to nothing, the more naturally it becomes part of your presence. You start entering situations with awareness instead of anxiety. You begin interacting from clarity instead of emotion, and people feel it. They feel that you are watching closely, thinking deeply, and responding only when it serves a purpose. Winning through influence instead of confrontation is one of the most sophisticated forms of strength because it allows you to shape outcomes without creating resistance, escalation, or unnecessary conflict. Influence is subtle, quiet, and strategic. It bypasses ego battles and goes straight to the psychology of the situation. Anyone can argue, threaten, or assert force, but those approaches drain energy and often provoke pushback. Influence, on the other hand, moves through people rather than against them. It positions you as a leader rather than an adversary, and that shift in dynamic changes everything. Influence begins with understanding people. When you know what someone values, fears, avoids, or desires, you can guide their choices without ever raising your voice. You're not manipulating, you're navigating. You're steering interactions by aligning your message with what drives them internally. Instead of confronting their defenses head-on, you move around them. Force challenges a person's ego, but influence works with it. People are far more willing to follow a direction when they feel respected, understood, and not threatened. That is why influence works even in environments where direct confrontation fails. Another aspect of influence is controlling your presence. When you show up grounded, consistent, and emotionally intelligent, people naturally take you seriously. They gravitate towards stability because most individuals operate in emotional turbulence. When you maintain clarity while others feel overwhelmed, they begin leaning into your voice as a source of certainty. Influence grows from trust, and trust grows from consistency. Every time you remain calm under pressure, speak with intention, and act with integrity, you grow your influence without saying a word. Influence also requires restraint. You don't need to win every point or dominate every conversation. You let small things go because you're focused on the larger objective. You allow others to feel in control even when you are quietly guiding the direction. People become more cooperative when they don't feel overpowered. A skilled influencer listens more than they speak because listening reveals leverage, what the other person cares about, what they avoid, what motivates them. Instead of fighting on the surface, you work beneath it. Quiet influence always outperforms loud confrontation. Another powerful part of influence is the ability to shift someone's perspective without attacking their identity. When you confront someone aggressively, they dig their heels in because their pride is at stake. But when you frame your message in a way that lets them see benefit rather than threat, they follow willingly. You're not forcing compliance, you're inspiring alignment. You're helping them feel that the decision is theirs, even though you shaped the path. This keeps relationships intact and prevents the emotional fallout that confrontation often creates. Influence also means choosing your battles with precision. You don't get drawn into unnecessary arguments, petty conflicts, or ego-driven debates. You save your energy for moments that matter and ignore the rest. When you avoid small confrontations, you maintain your credibility and keep your impact strong. People take you more seriously when they see that you're not reactive, defensive, or easily provoked. Your influence grows because your presence becomes associated with clarity and purpose rather than chaos or competition. Winning through influence is about ensuring the outcome without damaging the process. It's about guiding, not forcing. It's about leading people to a conclusion rather than dragging them into one. Influence gets you what confrontation often fails to deliver: respect, cooperation, and long-term advantage. When you navigate situations with composure and psychological intelligence, people recognize that you operate on a higher level. They listen more, resist less, and align more easily with your direction. Influence becomes your quiet power, the kind that works consistently, subtly, and effectively, even in the most challenging situations.